Hi guys! I know I told you I wanted to do a bit of a book chat about the first section of The Road, pages 3 through 58. Make sure that throughout this week you are making progress with finishing that section. This year, just by the general setup of, classes and how things are going, it's going to need to be pretty independent work. I'm going to try to help you out with things as best as I can, but you do need to put in the work. And I know it's going to be difficult, but we can do it. So as far as this book chat for the first section goes, there's not a ton of hard action in here. I mean, not that there really is throughout the rest of the book, but mostly this section is dedicated to, first of all, exposition, which I know 8th Hour we already talked about, but getting to know the plot and the setting and the characters and kind of getting a sense of this world before we move forward with some of the more action-y type of things. So as far as the setting goes, we already talked about how it's America, but it's after some apocalyptic event. Something happened where society got destroyed and everything's covered in ash and it, is destroyed. And this is what our characters, the man and the boy, have to deal with. So we get the sense of the world through a lot of the descriptions that the author Cormac McCarthy gave. I know we talked about how he uses descriptions of things being like black and the gray light and the paling sun and everything. It's if I had to paint a picture of this book, it would be in black and white, because you have to think about it. If things had burned and there was ash covering everything, and the sky was hazed out by that, everything would be like black, white, and gray, be a very washed out color. But we also did talk about how in the flashbacks that the man has of the world before, he uses descriptions of color, probably because back before this event everything wasn't covered in ash, but he talks about like the yellow leaves and the green trees and the blues of lakes. And so when you have something that goes from one extreme to kind of the other, so like stark black, white, gray, everything washed out that way, to suddenly talking about something that is opposite, that is usually an indication that it's symbolic or something to pay attention to, or something that can be analyzed for deeper meaning. So if he is talking about the past in terms of color, you can also connect that to how do you think the man feels about the past? What do you think his memories sort of mean to him? That sort of thing. I know 8th hour we got to about page 15 in class. 7th hour we got to about page 19. And not a lot happened. All right, like I said to both classes, in the apocalypse, if you're walking thousands of miles to get someplace else and the population of the world has dramatically decreased, it's going to be really boring. You're going to be walking, looking for food, walking, looking for shelter, walking, trying to avoid the bad guys. All right, it's really boring. All right, but we do get a few things here and there that help us to connect to, first of all, where the setting of this is, but it also helps us connect to what the characters are like. So quickly on page 21, he said, the narrator says, "A long barn in a field with an advertisement with faded 10-foot letters across the roof slope, see Rock City." All right, that might be a city, or it could be some amusement park or whatever it is, but that could be a clue to where these guys are. And then I'm going to skip ahead to help you. On page 33 at the bottom, they're walking and they're kind of going up this mountain, and the man and the boy are looking out, and the boy says, "What is it, Papa?" And he says, "It's the Gap. This is it." So if you look up, Rock City, and if you think about this gap and in relation to where they are, they're actually talking about the Cumberland Gap, which is this, mountain pass between, I think it's Kentucky and Tennessee, And it's just, first of all, being used as a way for the reader to kind of familiarize where are they, but also how close are they to getting to their destination. The man and the boy, they're trying to get to the ocean. And that might be, like from Tennessee, like just cutting down to maybe like South Carolina. Maybe they're trying to go all the way to like Florida. I don't know, because it never really says that specifically. But they have a long way to go yet. Turning back, however, we get this cute little scene, a good characterization on page 23. Tells us kind of a lot about the man and the boy. And they're at this grocery store or supermarket, and they find this vending machine, and the dad kind of like hits it, and a Coca-Cola pops out. And the boy says, "What is it, Papa?" "It's a treat for you." "What is it?" "Here, sit down." So the boy doesn't know what Coca-Cola is. And that, combined with a few other things, gives us the sense that this world, this apocalypse, is the only thing the boy has ever known. He doesn't know what Coca-Cola is, and right, like in our lives, it's the most famous soda brand there is. And through the scene, the dad asks the boy, he's like, "Here, have it." And the boy says, "You take some." And the boy's like, "Well, I want you to have some." And the man's like, "It's okay, you just drink it." And on the bottom, he says, the boy took the can and sipped it and handed it back. Or the man took the can, sipped it, handed it back. "You drink it," he said. "Let's just sit here." The boy says, "It's because I won't ever get to drink another one, isn't it?" "Ever's a long time." "Okay," the boy said. So you might notice as we go through this book, one of the things about the boy is he gets, they might be having as much of a light-hearted encounter as they can, and then all of a sudden the boy gets really serious. So he's a very serious, you have to be. You have to be serious. You can't just, be in like a regular kid during this type of world. But the kid recognizes that this thing that like most of us, our parents, would do is like, "Here, have a treat." "No, I don't want any. You have it. It's fine. You have it." To us that would be totally normal, and we just have it. But this kid realized he can't take that normal father-son interaction for what it is. Because he knows they're never going to have a Coca-Cola again, probably. By some miracle, unless they find another vending machine or whatever, this is the only time it's ever going to happen. And the boy is uncomfortable with that. And like we talked about with the Maslow's hierarchy needs, the very first thing that people need before they can get anything else in their life is they need their basic needs taken care of: shelter, food, water. All right. And if the boy has always lived in this world, that's all he's ever known. They've been going from place to place to place, finding food, finding water, finding shelter. And so he doesn't know how to accept love as well as, some of us would, because that's too high on the needs list. You can't work on, having, a healthy, functional father-son relationship when you're trying to scramble for food. You have to concentrate on fueling your body. So he's kind of it's a strange father-son relationship, just because that's the only way it can be. Over the next couple of pages, the father finds his old childhood home. The boy is really scared of it for some reason, and even after all the times that I've kind of gone through this book, I've never really understood why the boy is so scared of it in particular. Because sometimes he'll come upon the house and the boy will be like, "We should go in there and check things out." But this one he's like, "No, I don't want to. Let's get out of here, blah, blah, blah." So I don't really know what's freaking the boy out here. But that's another thing that could have a symbolic interpretation is, what does this old, childhood house of his father's, what could it represent to somebody who's never had a childhood like that? The next few bits of book, it's more like walking through the mountains. On page 30, there's a little bit of a memory of things like he's talking about boulders like the shape of bears. Once he'd watched trout in the current of a river. But those things don't exist anymore. Right? And it's kind of too much for the man. We talked about page 33, the Cumberland Gap. And then the next part is on page 39. It's really small, and we don't really need to focus on a whole lot, but it's the man and the boy are doing a quick, bathing up in a pool by a waterfall. They're just, washing the gunk off of them. And then on top of page 39, they have this like quick little father-son moment where the father's like kind of trying to teach his kid how to swim. And it's like that they're trying to have a little kernel of normal life, but kind of like all the other parts in this book where that's happening, it ends a little too quickly because due to this apocalyptic event, the world has become colder. I mean, there's ash covering the sky, so that'll make it colder. And so they have to kind of end the swimming session before they want to. The next part that I want to bring to your attention is on page 43. They find a semi-truck that's just kind of like sat in the road. It's a jackknife in the road. They search the cab or the front of it for supplies, and they wind up sleeping in it. And it isn't until like the next day on page 47 that the man decides to go check out the trailer because it's lighter. And this is a part where we get kind of a hint that, I mean, yeah, there are other survivors in the world, but they aren't like the man and the boy. There's something much creepier and sinister going on here, because when the man opens the bed of the truck, or when he opens the trailer of the truck and he, shines a torch, or he has this like torch and he looks down it, what he sees in this truck are humans, and human bodies that have been like burned. Now, yeah, the apocalypse happened, but that's not really a situation that people would generally find themselves in, even if it was an apocalyptic situation. So we know that during this time there are people in this apocalyptic time that are doing this. All right, and you'll notice throughout this section, the boy and the man, they're always on the lookout for fires, and they're on the lookout for other people. And so it's kind of this creepy, like what's the deal with these other people? On page 49 and 50, they finally do see another person, and of course they're really nervous about it and skittish about it at first. But it just turns out it's this single lone man, and he had been struck by lightning, and he's like barely, keeping himself upright. And we see that the boy, kind of strangely, he has this pure streak in him. He wants to help the man, and this happens throughout the book. The boy, he wants to help people. And even though his whole entire life has been in this post-apocalyptic situation, and even though like he's lived this whole time with just him and a man, and they have to fight for their own survival, he wants to be good. He wants to do good things. But the man says that they can't help this guy who's been struck by lightning. So in the next like little scene, the boy's crying because they couldn't have helped him, and also because this happened to somebody. And so the man has to keep assuring him, we couldn't do anything, we couldn't help him, we can't give our supplies away. And then finally, probably the most important part of this first section comes on page 55, and it goes through page 58, kind of the end of our bit here, the very last few pages. We finally get to meet the woman, the man's wife. Again, she doesn't have a name, just like all the other characters, but in this scene, the man is trying to get his wife going. It's like, okay, they're still at their old house before the apocalypse. The son, he's a baby or a toddler probably. And the man's like, we got to go. We're survivors. We got to keep on surviving, but we can't stay here because we need food, we need supplies, etc., etc. And the woman's not having it. And she's saying like, maybe it would have been better if we ended this a long time ago. I should have done it. It was my responsibility. It can save us all this pain, all that kind of stuff. And he's saying, you're talking crazy. We are surviving. We can do this. We can live. Your son needs you. I need you. And she's like, no. First of all, and again, this kind of gives us a hint of the type of people that are out there in this world. She's like, no. Sooner or later, they, and she doesn't specify, they just like, they will catch us, they will, rape me, they'll kill us, they're going to, do awful things to us, so it's not even worth it. And the man, he's angry at her. He's so angry, and even afterwards, after she does decide to take her own life, he's so angry at her for it. And she said, I don't need you. I'm not going to stay with you because I've taken a new lover. And he's like, oh yeah, who? And he's like, Death. And he's like, Death's not a lover. And she's like, oh yes, he is. And so she's made up her mind. And on page 58, she's made her decision. She takes this flake of like obsidian, which is volcanic glass, and she ends her life. And this was all kind of in the man's memory, and so when he looks over the boy, he was also thinking about his mother, and he says, she's gone, isn't she? And the man said, yes, she is. So that is what happened to her. I mean, she survived the event, but, she didn't have the strength that the man did to keep alive. So, I mean, it's really kind of dark, obviously, but it's really sort of a look at, what are people built for? And are we all built capable of survival, and some people are just, given to weakness, or are some people just not built for that? I mean, obviously, in our Catholic faith, obviously we do believe, that the woman should not have taken her life. She should, and even kind of in a moral sense, she should have stayed there for her son at least. But that's another thing that will kind of be covered by this whole concept of, the religious connections that get made in this book. So hopefully this little book chat has kind of helped you make some connections, help you understand what's kind of going on, and helped you kind of bring out what is most important in the section of the book. Make sure you do read completely until the end of page 58, and then from here on we'll move on. So thank you for watching my book chat.